Another millennial. Excuse me, millennial is not synonymous with young person. I'm in Generation Z. Millennials. Okay, boomer. I'm a silent, dang it. Hello and welcome to All Generations. For quite some time, the term millennial was associated with young person, but much to our dismay, millennials are not the youngins anymore. There's a new kid on the block and they go by Generation Z or Gen Z. Or other things, but that's another video, so check that out if you want. Today, I will be talking about Generation Z, experiences and events which may have defined or shaped their lives, including what I think is their 9/11 and their opinions and characteristics. So also, I keep feeling a little weird or not right saying Gen Zs or Gen Zs. So while I'll still probably do that sometimes, I'm going to sometimes use the term Zoomers. It kind of rolls off the tongue easier, and I think it's one of their more preferred nicknames. Let's address birth years. They are not 100% consistent, so I am thinking about addressing them more in a future video. But for now, I'll tell you that they begin somewhere between the early 90s to 2005 and end anywhere from the early 2000s to now. Most commonly, they begin in the mid to late 90s and end around 2012. Okay, so let's touch on events and experiences. First, historical events and movements type stuff, and then the topic of tech as its own category in this section. Generation Z is young, and while we don't know exactly how young the youngest members are, it's probably somewhere between babies and elementary school. Because of that, more recent events are going to be more relevant to the generation as a whole, which is why I'll be giving that a little more focus and not going too far back in time. Let's begin with the most recent ongoing situation, the pandemic. If 9/11 was the key event for millennials, which is what most people say, I think COVID-19 is probably it for Gen Z. It's pretty darn significant, and it's something that I don't think anyone who is alive and of remembering age would forget. Side note, in general in this video, I am going to be using the birth years Pew uses. That's 1981 to 1996 for millennials, and after 1996 for Gen Z. I'm going to choose an end birth year of 2012, which I admit is somewhat arbitrary, but it sets the generation at the same number of years as the previous two generations, and it is being used by some people. So going with the Pew years, the youngest Zoomers are school age, elementary school age, and the oldest are early 20s-ish. That is similar to the age range of millennials during 9/11. And since the youngest members are a tad older, I would say it's even more fitting. I don't really see a 4 or 5-year-old quite grasping 9/11, but I do see an 8-year-old understanding the idea of a virus that has spread around the world. Additionally, the generation after Gen Z, which we're currently calling Gen Alpha, probably won't have many memories of pre-virus times, and some won't have any memories of it. Just as most Gen Z don't remember a time before 9/11 or pre-internet times. In 10 years, they'll probably be telling Gen Alphas, "Oh, baby Alpha, when I was your age, during the pandemic, blah, blah, blah." Funnily enough, both 9/11 and COVID-19 also have the numbers 1 and 9 in them. So just a little bit more on why I think that it is their event. Most members of Generation Z are in school right now, whether it be elementary school, middle school, high school, college, technical school, etc. Anyway, there are a lot of kids who might have missed their graduation or prom or just a lot of school in general. Some of them might have parents or older siblings who lost their jobs. They might be doing school from home. Their parents might now be working from home. If they were old enough to be in the workforce, they might have lost their job. They might have moved back in with their parents. And I could go on, but you get the point. While I know things have varied regionally, actually quite a bit, almost everyone has experienced a change in their day-to-day in some way. For now, we can only guess at the long-term effects. Will we see a rise in concern with cleanliness and germs, less large gatherings, concerts, conventions, etc., or will they just change? What problems are being neglected due to the virus that are then going to become bigger issues afterwards? Part of it depends on how long things go on, and if there are longer term effects of the virus, that's yet another thing. Side note, I would appreciate it if you would give this video a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos on the topic of generations, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Now, for something else which is currently ongoing. the Black Lives Matter movement. BLM has been an ongoing movement since 2013. It's so big that, like COVID, I probably don't need to explain it to you, but just in case, Black Lives Matter is a decentralized movement which advocates against police violence towards Black people, though different subsets of it may have more specific goals. In general, it's a movement against racial violence towards Black people. More recently, in the year 2020, the movement has gained even more attention and support. A New York Times article written in July 2020 was titled, "Black Lives Matter may be the largest movement in US history. Protests have been big. The George Floyd protests were the largest in the US by size, and they even spread internationally. Some cities enforced curfews, and many companies have come out to express support for the movement. Some of them are taking action to reduce racism and or be more inclusive. Over the course of the movement, some changes have been made to policing and society in general. One example is the expanded use of body cameras by police after Ferguson in 2014. Some of the older Zoomers have been participating in the movement, and most of them have probably had it shape their views in some way and have had some exposure to it. Another large social movement in recent years is the Me Too movement. Me Too is a movement against sexual harassment and abuse. It really gained steam in 2017, at which point only a small portion of Zoomers were adults. So I'm actually unsure of how much they knew about it or how much was communicated to them. But like BLM, it was also recognized worldwide. Also similar to BLM, it has resulted in a greater awareness of certain topics. The greater context is that they are all growing up in this time of a lot of big social movements, and they will also be living with the effects of them. The Women's March in 2017 was the largest in US history at the time, and even now it only falls behind the George Floyd protests. While I'm on the topic of movements, there's also the climate change movement. This is worth mentioning as it has been especially popular among Zoomers, and some, like Greta Thunberg, have been widely discussed in the media. There's also been an increase in vegetarianism and veganism, though people do that for a variety of reasons. So this next one is multiple events and also a general idea. Gen Z has seen a greater prevalence of school shootings and mass shootings in general during their school years than previous generations. This is a topic I don't really like to talk about because I think there is some association between hearing about it and more events like this occurring, but it is very relevant for Gen Zs. What Columbine was for Millennials, Sandy Hook kind of was for Gen Z. Again, going off few years, Millennials were 2 to 18 during Columbine, while Zoomers were 0 to 15 for Sandy Hook. And difference is the presence of smartphones and social media. There have been plenty of other events, but I'm just going to leave it at that. It has become a big enough concern, though, that there are now drills associated with, and so a lot of Gen Z members are growing up doing these drills and having more anxiety about the issue. I found a 2019 Newsweek article that referenced a survey from Central Square, which found that Gen Z and Millennials were twice as worried about mass shootings as Boomers. The article also mentioned a National Institute of Justice research project, which found that 20% of mass shooting incidents in the last 53 years occurred in the last 5. Possibly because of all this, there are many vocal Gen Z gun control activists, such as some of the high schoolers in Parkland, though I don't know the views of the generation on the subject as a whole. Next, elections are sometimes thought of as significant events. Whether or not 2020 will be one of those that's going down in history remains to be seen. I think the 2016 election is significant though. For the first time in US history, we faced the real possibility of a female president. It was also a very divisive election with a lot of negative feelings towards both candidates. Even though most of Generation Z was too young to vote, most of them would have had an idea of what was going on. Stepping back, maybe a little too far, in 2008, Barack Obama was elected as the first Black president of the US. No Zoomers were old enough to vote, but it's pretty significant because some of them won't remember a time before the US had a Black president. One possible effect of both of these elections would be that this younger generation is going to grow up with a more expanded idea of who can become president. The roles you see other people in can often affect your views of yourself. Next, the legalization of gay marriage. I'm going to note again that I am talking about the US because in some countries, homosexual behavior is still illegal and can result in severe penalties. At the same time, gay marriage was legal in 0 countries before 2001 when it was legalized in the Netherlands. So in more recent years, views on homosexuality have undergone big changes. It was in 2004 that a state, Massachusetts, first legalized same-sex marriage. After many legal battles in various states and at different levels, on June 26, 2015, same-sex marriage became legal at the federal level in the US. Now, it might be a little early to be a total Gen Z event, as many members were still babies, but it still clearly would have lasting effects for the generation, and the youngest members are growing up only knowing it as legal. In general, Zoomers have seen the further normalization and acceptance of non-heterosexual relationships. Okay, we have another one back from 2008, the Great Financial Crisis / the recession, whatever you want to call it. According to almost any birth years you use, no member of Gen Z was 18 yet at this time. So most of them were not old enough to be affected in the same way adults were affected by this, but they did grow up seeing, at least many of them, their parents or much older siblings struggle. In some cases, this may have brought up important discussions surrounding expectations, jobs, money, etc. Some say that the experience may have made them more pragmatic and they've been able to apply what they learned in general. It may have also made them a little more pessimistic though. But this is for the older members of Gen Z for the most part, as a portion of the generation wasn't even born yet. But those kids got COVID, so pretty much everyone got to experience something like that. Also, Gen Z pretty much all entered school in a post 9/11 world, and that is all the historical events and movements that I'm going to talk about today. If you are a member of Gen Z, or even if you aren't and you have an additional suggestion, feel free to leave it in the comments. Now I'm moving on to technology. Technology plays a major role in most of our lives on a daily basis. New tools and devices have resulted in major changes in the way we live. Zoomers are usually digital natives, which basically means that they grew up in a digital world instead of being introduced to it as an adult. Some of the technology that predates the generation, meaning these came along before any members of the generation were even born, again, still using the few years, includes things like computers, laptops, the internet, the World Wide Web, email, etc. Things like the 24-hour news cycle even came about before Gen Z. The first few birth years would be viewed in a similar manner because only a small percentage were even born, and of those that were, they would have limited memories of this time, if any. In that time, Google was launched. Wi-Fi was introduced for home use. The first DVD players were introduced, and in that time even began to outpace VHS sales. And the first iPod came out. And the oldest members of the generation were preschool through first grade age. MySpace came out and digital camera sales outpaced film. This means Gen Z didn't really experience a pre-social media world. Even at this point, the oldest members of Gen Z were too young for it. Taking photos was also getting easier and faster. When the oldest members of Generation Z were still under 10 and the youngest still weren't even born yet, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, Amazon Prime, and Google Maps were all launched. Moving on to the oldest members, being in the 10 to 13 sort of preteen and also still pre-high school age. Home broadband use reached 51% in the US, so over half now had that. Chrome came out. The first iPhone and iPad were released. Netflix began streaming. Hulu launched to the public. Spotify, Tumblr, and Pinterest launched. Apps like Instagram, WhatsApp, and Grindr came out, and Bitcoin was released. And again, those are the oldest members of the generation. They weren't even in high school yet. We still have Zoomers who weren't born yet. So now we're at a point where most of them are growing up with internet. Streaming services are starting to be available, though may not be widely used yet. Instagram is a thing, and while most are still too young to have them, smartphones are out and starting to be more popular. Shortly after that, Uber launched, and Twitch and Minecraft came out. I don't know anything about Minecraft or its popularity, but I see a lot of Zoomers mention it, so I thought I should too. Just painting a picture of the environment that they're growing up in. 2012 is the end birth year we're using today, and so the next things I'm going to go over are things that happened in the first few years of those end babies' lives, which is when the oldest members are in high school. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Obviously, they're having wildly different experiences. That is true for every generation when you have a time span of 15 to 20 years. It's just the way it is. It isn't unique to them, but it could be worth exploring, and maybe I'll do this. Do they have more of a difference between the oldest and youngest in past generations? And remember, there's also cuspers, which can satisfy maybe some of you, cusp generations. But for now, back to this. So in this time period, Snapchat, Tinder, Bumble, DoorDash, FaceTime, and a cellular version of Skype, the Amazon Echo, and Uber Eats all launched or came out. That means that before this generation reached adulthood, you could order your dinner and a date from an app. Swipe right, and I have my date, and sushi. I mean, it's not quite like that, but you get the point. It was a major change. And the youngest of the generation pretty much won't remember a time before any of the things I've mentioned so far. According to the CDC, 2014 was the year that over half of children growing up in the US were in households without landline, meaning wireless only. In 2015, subscription streaming outpaced DVD sales. In 2017, TikTok launched and Fortnite came out. And in 2019, Pew found that 90% of adults were now online. The rest of Gen Z's tech story is yet to come. I also want to note that people have different experiences just based off of individual things, like whether they are rural or urban, their income level, their parenting, their community, their race or gender, etc. Now let's delve into some of the characteristics and opinions of Zoomers. Zoomers are mostly the children of Gen Xers who would have been 17 to 47 during those birth years. Millennials and Boomers are the next most likely to be the parents of Gen Z. Zoomers are more likely to have college-educated parents, which tends to be associated with the children also getting a college education. And so far that trend seems to be true. With entering the adulthood, many of them are still in school. The high school dropout rate is also lower. Diversity-wise, this is the most ethnically and racially diverse generation in the US, unless you want to count Generation Alpha, but they are not all born yet. Zoomers are less likely to be religious. They are more likely to grow up in an urban environment. They drive later, which could be due to a variety of reasons, ranging from the fact that they know they can rely on services like Uber and Lyft, as well as delivery services like Amazon Prime and Uber Eats and so on, but also because they know they can access some social abilities at home through social media, through video calls, text, just smartphones in general. So you can see that some of the context of the time in which they're growing up is affecting their behavior, or at least it seems that way. Some suggest Zoomers are more risk averse, which is another thing that could be due to the time in which they're growing up in. And by that I mean a number of things, ranging from unstable economic times to things like seeing millennials get in trouble for things they posted on social media or others tagged them in their early social media days. In general, members of Generation Z seem to be drinking less, doing less illicit drugs, and smoking less cigarettes. Though in recent years, vaping is on the rise, and once they reach college age, more of them are using marijuana, which could be in part due to the legality in certain states. Teen pregnancy has also been on the decline. This is true for millennials, but it is a continuing trend. Jean Twenge, who studies generations along with Hee-Jung Park, published a long-term study which found that aside from drinking less, these younger people are also working less while they're teens and going on dates less. When they do things, they are often documenting them on social media. This is a change from the past, and now more people are aware of times when they might be left out of situations. Which kind of brings us to the next topic, as it could be a factor. Many Zoomers report poor mental health and loneliness. Different reasons have been cited, ranging from more accurate reporting, to phones and social media, to just less interpersonal interaction in general. If we are going to find an upside, there is increased acceptance and openness about this subject, and they are more likely to seek help. Additionally, many Generation Z members are interested in making a difference in the world. There seems to be a degree of activism culture among the generation, which could have been driven by them growing up in these times with a lot of big movements, and possibly just the context of time in general. Gen Z is more inclusive of things like race, sexuality, and gender. The Merriam-Webster word of the year for 2019 was they. Zoomers are far more likely than the other generations to say they know someone who goes by gender-neutral pronouns. Multitasking is said to be more common among Zoomers. Additionally, many say they are more pragmatic. Partly because of technology possibly, which allows them to connect with people in other parts of the world, they may have a more global perspective as well. Now, some of what I have said applies more so to older Zoomers, as the young ones are still quite young, but we're working with what we have. And that is all we have for Generation Z today. Also, as a reminder, each generation is made of a diverse group of individuals, and most of these are still generalizations. Hope you enjoyed, and please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.